everyone. We've got a few people still joining in the webinar here, so we'll give it a couple of seconds just before we kick off. But thank you everyone for joining us. I hope everyone is having a good day, and hopefully it can't have been that bad a day if you're finding time to join us 4 o'clock over the hump day of the week. So thank you very much everyone for joining. This is the Hate It, Automate It webinar series here with Centelli, and we're joined with a fantastic couple of guests with us today. I will introduce myself first, and then we'll 2 minutes past, I'll then introduce Daniel and Nish as well. But first off with me is your host, who is aiming to say as little as possible as we get these two talking. My name is Sam Cornford. I'm Director of Business Development at Centelli and responsible for all of our customers from a commercial perspective. Can see a few more people still just kicking in. So give it 10 more seconds, and then we will go. Brilliant. I don't think there's anyone else new. Right, okay. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. It's the Hate It, Automate It webinar series here with Centelli. You've got myself, Sam Cornford, and I'm joined by two people here where we're just going to pick their brains for 45 minutes, an hour on everything that's around RPA and the evolution of that into Agentic, which is where we've been for the last 12 months or so. First of those guests is Anish Gupta, who is Managing Director and founder of Centelli. He is responsible for everything automation, RPA, AI, agents, all delivery for the Centelli customer base. So there isn't really anyone else that we would turn towards to essentially use their knowledge on this subject. And then definitely last but not least, who arguably has probably got equal credentials to Anish, really will say, is Daniel Del Moro, who is the Agentic expert, and he's Director of AI and Automation Innovation at UiPath. And for those of you that know UiPath, that itself tells you everything about all you need to know about him. But those that don't know UiPath are the leader in automation platforms and Agentic, which is where it's going. And Daniel Del Moro, I won't say how long you've been with there, Daniel, because we don't give away your age, but
82 years.
82 years, but really knows his stuff. So with two really excellent people here. So first thing we'll do is 3 minutes on setting a scene around where did RPA start out? Why did we use it? Where has it come from? And then what it's turning into now with Agentic. And then we've essentially got a few different subjects to go through for debate, which we'll position to Anish and Daniel for the rest of the session. So sorry, just still letting people in as they're coming through. So every organization has to start off somewhere. And the first rung and the most important rung of any organization are the human workforce, the employees, the people. As people, we're able to do almost anything that a business requires. We can work on transactional, routine, repetitive sides of the day, but we can also do stuff that really engages our brain and adds a lot of value to the organization. So this is where we would be dealing with customers, or this is where we'd be selling or looking at revenue analysis. And that's the place we tend to enjoy spending time ourselves. And that's definitely where our employers would rather us spend as much time as possible. As we moved on in the last 40, 50 years into the computer age or the system age, computer applications were introduced to try and make businesses function more and help the humans in doing what they were doing. So this will be anything from ERP applications or any financial system. This will involve HR systems, warehouse management systems, POS, TILs, point of sale. They've all been created and brought into organizations with the aim of making a business run more effectively by essentially helping streamline how data is processed and doing rather important jobs for the business. Now, we can't live without them, right? So every system that you can think of on that critical stage on CRM or the ERP applications or anything of the like, organizations can't live without them. But the challenge that every organization has is they have very fixed boundaries, and those systems, although sometimes will talk to each other, not every application will interact with each other quite as easily or as seamlessly as what we would want it to as a business. So what we're left with is gaps between applications, which means we've got data that can't get from one place to another, and it leaves us disjointed processes and tasks that in a perfect world we wish wouldn't exist, but they're there anyway. That's where it starts to take up people's time, because people end up having to plug the gaps between those systems because we are pretty flexible and we can jump on different screens and go through the through our own username and password and move data around. And we end up becoming the glue between those applications because we're flexible, but we have limitations. We're not machines and we don't work 24/7, and we can occasionally make mistakes. So historically, this is where RPA, or robotic process automation, and digital workers have been operating for the last 10 years, really. The reason we've always termed them digital workers, with RPA as I guess the engine of a digital worker, is a digital worker has the same rules and perspective of the systems as a person. So a digital worker gets its own username, gets its own password, uses keystrokes and uses mouse clicks, and it essentially does everything on the screen the same way a person would do it. It's a digital version of an employee sitting on a virtual machine somewhere within a company network, whereas a human or someone like me would sit on a laptop or a desktop. But fundamentally, the way that a digital worker will jump between those systems and make that process join together by doing the copying and pasting and data manipulation is the same way that a person would do it, through the screens. Digital worker 24/7 will just keep going, and they don't have the things like, they don't have holiday and they don't take coffee breaks. They've always been very, very good at doing those transactional repetitive tasks. But where they've generally struggled is where you've got areas that rules are too complex, or you've actually got too much variation that you can't write rules for it. So the last few years, and this has been where we use AI a little bit more to help out with some scenarios like that. And a couple of examples will be unstructured communications that come through from customers or guests or employees that might be in a format like an email or a text message, but stuff that tends to be free text written, because you could have 10 different people asking one question, but we would all ask it the same way. And that, for a digital worker, would confuse a digital worker because it can't pick out the difference. So we start to lean on AI a little bit more for scenarios like that, because we can teach AI to look out for things like sentiment and key terms, and it's able to understand those things that a digital worker on its own can't. Or the flip side will be on just lots of document formats as well. And invoice processing and looking at invoices is probably our most common one here, just because if you only have 5 suppliers, it's quite easy to write rules for 5 suppliers for a digital worker to go to. But if you've got 1,000 suppliers, that's too much variation. Again, that's where we lean on AI. So AI is digital work has been the hands and the body. It's always been able to do a lot of that transactional stuff. And then we use AI now as essentially that digital worker's brain, which it taps into. And the biggest part really that's come through in the last 12 months, which is, basis of where this webinar is coming from. And I won't talk about it too much here because I saved that for the experts, but how agents fit into that. And agents essentially can act as an overarching orchestrator. It's able to see big picture of things that are going on, instead of a digital worker sits at that task layer. So if you take month end as an example, month end is actually, it's not one task, it's a bunch of different things that need to happen for a business to be able to do its month end closing. An agent is able to look at that big picture and start to point out to digital workers where to go, what to do at which time. If it has an issue, present that as a question to a human counterpart on how to help deal with that one. And that's where we'll obviously spend a bit of time talking today. So one of the things I should have said at the start, though, is if you have questions, keep them pumping out and typing them through as we go through the session, and we'll have a bit of room at the end. So on that note, we will move over, stop sharing here, and start positioning some questions to the gentleman. So the first place we're going to start is talking about what's the difference between agentic and a deterministic decision making. So I'm going to start with you, Anish, then. So where does deterministic and rules-based automation still win, and where does it start to fall apart a little bit?
So we've been doing rules-based automation for a number of years, and UiPath has been in this industry for over a decade now. And where rules-based automation wins is where we need consistency and reliability, where we say that we know what's going to happen and this is what's going to execute. This is how it needs to execute. So think about it. If you have a standard operating procedure, a process definition, and you say that's how my process needs to run because that's how we ensure reliability and scalability, then automation is the way to go. What it's not able to handle is variability. And that's where AI comes in. And a really simple test that we say is, if you give the same input and the same written instructions, it's called the 2 people test. If you give the same input and the same written instructions to 2 trained people, will they produce the same result every time? If the answer to that is yes, it's automation, it's consistency, deterministic. If the answer is no, then there's variability, and that's where AI gets involved.
Yeah, thank you. So on the flip side of that, then for Daniel, where does agentic automation sit? How does it complement? Where does it work, and where do we still need rules-based automation?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And thanks, Anish. Good definition of the deterministic side of things. So I'm going to start off just with, I guess, a bit more of a definition of what we see as an agent. So a definition of that really is the use of generative AI, and we've all played with things like ChatGPT, where we're always blown away by the results that come back when we type in a question. So it's very capable of understanding language, but we link an agent with tools so that it can actually get things done. We also give it context of best practice and standard operating procedures. We also give them ability to escalate to a human when they're stuck. But what makes agents very, very different from the deterministic approach of using robots is that agents can make their own plan of action, really, of how to solve a problem using the tools that you've given them. They can make sense of complex data. They can provide guidance and escalate to people when required. So crucially, going back to that variance point, they are highly adaptable. So think about a use case. Let's imagine that you receive a lot of supplier agreements in, and you've got to choose the best supplier. Now, how you interpret those agreements, you need to understand the language they're written in, but you also need to determine if it's a good agreement or if there are risks. And agents are very well suited to that. We could, if we wanted, write a very deterministic set of rules that a robot could look out for, but we need something a bit more adaptable. And that's where agents are very good. There is a tendency, though, I'll caveat this a little bit. There is a tendency these days to think that agents can do anything. And for the most part, they can. But as we'll dive into in this chat, they are computationally expensive. If you just need to pull data from somewhere and move it somewhere else, although an agent could do that, it's probably not a valuable use of an agent. And we'll come on to some of the other aspects of things to be careful of with agents as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. So I guess that is our starting point. And let's dive into a couple of scenarios where we can actually talk about some of these examples where we would use either or. So let's start off with low variation on the side point. So things that could be something like bank reconciliations or where order entry needs to be done or placing of bookings into a system. And I guess that's stuff that's just repeatable because it's templated. So I'll open question then in terms of, for you guys, what's the right approach here? And I'll start with Daniel, actually. What's the right approach here?
Yeah, so I think with these low variation use cases, they do play really well into the deterministic tools aspect. That is robots doing RPA, but with maybe a bit of an element of AI-powered automation. So the ability to use deterministic rules to extract data from documents and things like that. And this is the bread and butter of traditional automation. So when we think of things like invoice processing, you could have robots extracting data from an invoice, and then another robot inputting that data into a financial system. And you could celebrate the fact that you've automated that. But things, as anyone knows, with payments and invoices, often there are problems. Line items aren't expected, or they differ from purchase orders that we might have. So if we just dealt with traditional automation, we'd struggle because we can't deal with those scenarios so effectively. So these usually get thrown out to human in the loop steps for humans to investigate and resolve before the robots pick up the baton again. So yeah, I think for the most part, deterministic robots will be good for these low variation tasks.
So from what you're saying, where there might be cases where it needs to tap into AI for some areas where there might be a few rules, is there any real case for agentic in these scenarios, agentic automation?
Great point. So I think the thing that I mentioned where we typically throw human in the loop for those complicated stages, these are actually perfect tasks for agents like reconciliation, which usually requires, I guess, investigation and understanding of what to do next. And the thing is, often the efficiencies in handling time that you save using robots to extract data from invoices are usually completely overshadowed by the amount of time for humans to investigate those discrepancies. And this is where agents can excel, not by replacing humans, but by performing much of that investigative work across systems and by suggesting how to resolve them back to humans, or even writing emails out to the vendors to resolve some of the issues. But we still crucially need people to view and make sense of this evidence and approve emails that get sent out. But that human handling time is massively reduced by the use of agents in parts of those processes.
Thank you. So flipping over to Anish then, where I guess does the rules-based perspective or approach clearly outperform from a cost and efficiency versus agents?
So I think Daniel alluded to this earlier as well. The challenge with AI, there's nothing in life that comes for free. So what we always have to do is we have to consider the cost of doing something and the returns we're going to get against it. So what AI offers us and agents offer us is they offer us an element of variability. So our time to market is going to be extremely fast because we don't have to write things down and we're letting AI do the interpretation. The cost is that it is a consumable and we're going to pay every time it gets used. So what we really need to do is when we're doing low variation processes, we really need to start defining the scenarios. And this is an area that we always struggle with when we're doing automation is it's very difficult to define scenarios. And we end up doing scenarios by discovery and by stumbling across them. So the way we should be handling low variation scenarios is do the rules for stuff that we know is upfront, put in AI for a layer in the middle that we say, actually, you know what, we think there's something like this here, but we don't really want to get busy writing the rules for it. Okay. And leave the edge cases still to the side. So trying to get scenario definition in, trying to get volume in there, anything that's high volume, move it into rules-based deterministic. So your cost is fixed. Anything that we are not able to figure out, put it into the probabilistic side and agents. We will pay an extra cost, but we'll get a faster time to market as a result of that, and faster returns.
Okay, so I guess if we then slide along to the next bit on the scale where we do get into the more high variation and the slightly more complex workflow. So a lot of the time this will be around things like claims processing or a bit things that involve a little bit more interaction with documents that are coming through. I guess for Anish then, where do you is that how you define where you would start to use AI and agents is based on what you just discussed?
Absolutely. So in the high variation processes, we'd want to flip it on its head. We'd want AI to lead and use AI to do, so take invoice processing as an example. Trying to write rules for the scenario of invoices that will come in, it's a virtual impossible task. However, I might have a set of 10, 20 suppliers, which are my high volume suppliers, and they send me lots of invoices for regular services that we deliver, put them into the low variation category and automate them rather than trying to use AI. But for other bits where variations, I start with AI, have AI spit out an output that is deterministic and use automation to then execute on it. So that way your entry to your systems is rules-based and it's controlled. And the variability of input, which is actually being driven by extra. If you look at why these scenarios exist, they exist because we're not able to standardize the input really. The input is dependent on an external agency that is outside our control. So use AI to handle that variation and use automation to handle our internal side, which is the execution on our systems. Okay? And there'll be bits in the middle, take supplier onboarding. I have to do a search for a duplicate supplier. There's an element of, well, I've got to have an AI agent that does the interpretation of the suppliers I have because the names might change, and use agents for that.
Thank you. So I'll go to Daniel. One of the things, Daniel, we get a lot of time, I'm curious to see if you do it as well, is a process or a problem or an issue will be proposed to us and a business will say, and we want to use AI to do that. And it's kind of, it flips it the wrong way, because you're almost addressing, you're taking a solution to a problem without really understanding the problem as much. Whereas what you want to try and do is understand the problem, and then you can work out which type of solution you're going to go there. So from what you see at UiPath and your vast customer base there, where, I guess, how do you determine which way to go yourself as well, and when does it make sense to introduce that intelligence instead of deterministic?
Yeah, so we hear that a lot as well. I think there's an absolute drive by enterprises to use AI because it seemed to be the thing that they should be doing right now. Otherwise, they're going to be left behind. But I don't think it's a line per se between using deterministic or AI agentic based things. It's very much a gray area. It's a sliding scale. And if you look at things like claims handling, there's the variation of the types of data that come in, but there's a lot of other aspects to this as well. You need to review the piece of evidence that have been submitted, and to work out what steps need to be taken beyond that point. Do we need to communicate more with the claimant? Are the evidence documents or the data sufficient, or are they incorrect? Do we need to do more to process the claim, or do we suspect fraud? There are all sorts of questions that you need to do. And absolutely, a lot of those aspects are where AI and agents absolutely shine, because they're able to make sense of complex data. But it's also the looking at how the flow goes. So we talk a lot about deterministic robots and AI being a bit more adaptive. But it's also sensible to think about the whole flow as well. The flow for case management, so for claims management, isn't so linear. There's all sorts of backflow and decisions to be made along the way. And having agents to oversee some of those decisions is important. So getting back to your question, for those customers who are really keen and excited to use agents for the process they have in mind, it's absolutely, we'll talk about where the benefits are of using agents along certain tasks in that process, but absolutely keep them grounded by the fact that deterministic tasks along that journey are still absolutely necessary and beneficial. So it shouldn't be we're going to use AI or we're going to use deterministic. It's usually a bit of a combination.
And there's definitely, AI is exciting. In my life, it's probably one of the most revolutionary changes that have happened. And the smartphone was a revolution, the internet was a revolution, but they took a lot of time to try to get into our lives and for us to understand what they are. AI and the LLMs and generative AI in particular has been extremely fast in terms of its access to people and people's ability to understand it, because the interface is English. It's freely available. So there's definitely a lot of excitement. And the question of businesses getting excited, it's coming from two places. There are some leaders who are seeing it as an opportunity, and some leaders who are afraid of missing out on AI. So they want to try to adopt AI. The net result is there's a push to adopt AI, and there's a lot of AI whitewashing that goes on as well. However, the reasons why we're here and why we're talking about these particular processes, that AI hasn't changed that reason. Those reasons have always existed. And I think it's going back to the core problem statement of why are we here, and why is this particular thing a problem, or why is this particular thing an opportunity, to look at it another way, is still core. And the solution of what gets used, whether it's agentic or whether it's AI or whether it's automation, that's secondary. Okay. And claims processing, and we talk about claims processing, we've got a lot of people here who are not necessarily from the insurance industry. The same scenario applies to something like supplier statements or supplier queries or order queries, or where's my order, that might be coming from customers. It's about the variation of input that's coming in, the variation of data that I might have, and how I can put those together to deliver an outcome that my business wants to deliver to a customer.
Moving on then, because I think Daniel said that kind of even in the high variation, it's mostly linear, but you'll still have a little bit of variation in that. When we move on to the final section, when we look at some of these examples on here, like if you've got sales inquiries that are coming through, there can be sometimes weeks in between communication or complaints. There's a lot of difference there. So I guess for that, Anish, can rules-based automation help in any of these scenarios? Can it keep up?
So we're going to take some of these, and in our experience, there are some variations in here which actually, even though the means of communication is unpredictable in email, however, the source of that email tends to be a system making it predictable. So I think there's a small use case where rules-based automation can come in. However, with Gen AI, for us, this has probably been the most exciting area that we can tackle. Whereas previously with automation, when it's consumer facing, unpredictable, we wouldn't touch it and we would still rely on humans to put some structure and analysis on it. It's opened up a world of opportunity. And in the last year, the number of things we've managed to automate in this and help speed processes along has just been so exciting.
Daniel, one of the things obviously agents are doing is enabling us to do a lot more with what we've got in our hands as well. But you mentioned it earlier, right? The cost is highest. There's got to be the value there. How do you factor in those big things like cost control and then a risk perspective as well, if you're looking at agents to help out in these areas?
Yeah, great question. I think first of all, just for the audience, just to think about the cost aspect. So they're not. When we think about robots doing deterministic stuff and agents doing AI stuff, they're not usually across the industry priced in the same way. So usually with robots, there's generally, for example, a license that lasts for a period of time, like a year for a robot. And actually, vendors who supply robots like UiPath, they don't care how much you use that robot. So it's in your favor to use a robot 24 hours a day. Moving data around between different systems. But on the flip side, with agents, the cost mechanism is usually on how many large language model calls they make to these Gen AI providers. So basically, if you have an agent and you use it a lot over a 24-hour period, then you're going to be paying more rather than using it just about 5 or 10 minutes a day. So obviously, you want to get the most benefit out of an agent. But you've got to make sure that you're using them for the right purpose. So I mentioned this example earlier about, if you just want to pull data out of an Excel table and put it somewhere else, sure, you could throw an agent at that. But that becomes an unnecessary expense when a deterministic robot would work perfectly well. When you get into the control and risk, you also want to look for a platform that allows you to manage the estate of agents as well. Across pretty much every enterprise I talk to at the moment, everybody's trialing or piloting different agents, different agentic technologies from different providers. What is beneficial is if you can bring all of those multi-agents from different providers into a single platform that allows you to manage and control them, deploy them even. It gives you better visibility on how much they're being used, but it also opens the door to things like proper governance and control, making sure they're not being overused, or at least managing the cost mechanism behind them. So maybe we can touch a little bit more on some of the operating models and things like that. But there's always a worry as well with agents around risk. The common expression I hear from people is, what if these agents go rogue? Well, imagine a new employee that you've just brought into an enterprise, and you give them all the tools in the business on their first day. Of course, you don't trust them yet. There is the potential that they can go rogue. With a new employee, you only give them the tools that they need access to get their job done. And the same is absolutely true with agents as well. You only give them the tools that they need to get their job done, which reduces the risk of going rogue. But you can also implement the concept of escalation, making sure that people are aware of what they're doing and allowing the agent to escalate when they're unsure, rather than just firing off random hats.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that was, I think, useful for everyone, because there's millions of tasks out there, and trying to decide an approach is pretty critical. But I guess if we then go on what you just said, Daniel, and we actually look at operating models as well. So if you were, I'll stay with you, Daniel, but if you're an operations or a finance leader or an executive, like people that have joined us today, how do you think about choosing approaches across, I guess, a function or an organization, so outside of the task level?
Yeah, great point. So operating models are really, really important, not just for agents, but across traditional automation as well. But with agents, it's really thinking about that centralized orchestration aspect. So bringing, as I mentioned, the different robot agent technologies together. The governance and policy layers then that enables means that you can put proper guardrails, segregation of duties, and role-based access to each of the individual robots, or uniformly across them. Another really, really important thing is, particularly if you're using agents from multiple vendors, is you need observability and traceability. So allowing a platform to access those agents across different technologies gives you that access to audit trails and decision reasons for why agents made decisions that they did. There's the whole concept that an operating model would bring in as well around life cycle management, including versioning, rollback, and change control. So processes over time absolutely evolve. With agents or with traditional automation, processes do evolve. There is no end state. And particularly when you start adding agents to the mix, sometimes processes need to be redesigned. There's not always a point in having automation doing exactly what people did. If you've improved the accuracy through the use of agents and robots, well, usually that means you can improve the process as well. And the last thing that an operating model would help bring in is what we call like an integration fabric, which provides connections to models and systems and data across the enterprise. And this integration fabric connects sources of data together. So it becomes less of a problem of where the data is stored, but what data do we have at our disposal for agents, people, and robots to use. And integrations, whether you're integrating via APIs or using RPA or using agents, integrations are the vital aspect of an operating model.
Thank you. I guess same question for you, Anish. How would you, again, not a task layer, but an operating model, how do you even approach looking at this and deciding where to use it all?
So I think you need to consider two aspects. Very simple. There's is my process deterministic, and do I want it to work in exactly the same way, irrespective of the number of variations every single time? Deterministic. Is there unpredictability in my process, and what is the reason for that unpredictability is key to understand. Is it being driven by external factors, which happens most of the times? Is it being driven by internal factors because we can't control it, or I just don't know? And that's all three are perfectly valid. And that's where you evaluate whether something like probabilistic should come in as well. The core of why we're doing this still remains the same, which is we shouldn't have been doing this process in the first place, or here's something we want to do, we just don't have the resources to do it. So the best way to do it is through automation. And I'm going to use automation in its broader sense. It doesn't matter whether it's rules-based or not. Let us handle that. As far as what we need you to explain, or what we need the business to understand, is, do I have a problem that needs solving? Is there a better way of doing things? Because that's not something we can do. That's something each organization has to do. And that's what makes organizations different. I've got a very simple rule. This is, if AI can do it, and AI can do it for all your competitors as well, what differentiates you? And that needs to be the core question that business leaders are focused on. How do I differentiate myself? How do we differentiate ourselves better, in a more productive way? And where can all these solutions that are available out there to me potentially help? We don't need you to do the answer. We need you to be asking the tough questions and then challenging us to say, are you guys an answer or not?
Sticking with you, Anish, what are some of the potential missteps out there, and where could companies get this wrong?
Where the missteps we see quite often is putting the cart before the horse, where people come in and say, I want to do AI. And we end up doing AI in places where automation could have equally done an equal job. Now that right. Or we're afraid to call in you looking at automation because we say we just don't know what we're doing and there's too much variability. And now we can address both those scenarios. So the ask is just look for things that you're doing that you say we shouldn't be doing. The series is named for that reason. If you hate it, let's automate it.
Daniel, any horror stories from your side that you've seen?
Yeah, so there's a few more things just related to an operating model that that are really important, where I've seen people not get this wrong, but not have the right approach. And one is that it's really, really important to have the right teams involved in any transformation program that involves AI and traditional automation. And I've seen situations where we have an automation team in an enterprise, and they've been doing traditional automation for years. And suddenly the conversation switches over to AI. One thing that's vital is to expand out the range of the teams involved in this new automation. So not just the center of excellence, but also people like the AI teams, if there is one. But also crucially getting business leaders of subject matter experts involved at those discovery stages, right at the very beginning, so they get visibility of what the benefits are to the business and can help that transformation program along. So I've seen situations where they've started to roll out a program using agents, but they haven't involved AI or they haven't involved IT properly. And suddenly there are big roadblocks in place that prevent the transformation from happening. So it's vital with an operating model to ensure right teams, right discovery, and setting the goals right from the outset. Get everybody involved.
So, because the thing that I'm getting here really is obviously no one size fits all. And if an organisation really was to be effectively utilising these, there's going to be a blend of everything that's in there. So you're going to have RPA and robots doing essentially the core work, but we can't live without them because that stuff still needs to be done. And then agents are going to help with AI, are going to help supply that decision making. So, Daniel, again, then staying with you, then. So, is that blend a bit of a finger in the air? How do you just what are the factors that you need to take into account to try and determine this approach?
Yeah, so I think companies need to realize that it isn't an either-or approach. So it's not a case of do I incorporate AI or deterministic based robots. It's understanding the true benefits of each. And like people, we have our own benefits in an organization. We have experience. We have the ability to make important decisions based on complex data. It's understanding where robots fit in and what the power and benefit of those are. Moving data around quickly and efficiently and cost effectively. And understand the benefits of agents. Being able to, with a limited tool set, make plans and act upon complex data. So it's through education. It's making sure that they understand what the strengths are of each of those different players in the game. And then whenever you go to design a process, look at each tasks along an end-to-end process and say, what skills do we need to get this task done? Is it a deterministic approach, a robot? Is it something where we need to make sense of data, AI? Is this something where we need proper sign-off and validation at the end, human? And it's orchestrating all of those different things together that's absolutely vital. And from our experience, the customers who are reaping the most benefit are the ones who are using multiple approaches to this. Deterministic robots, AI agents together. They're the ones who are succeeding and driving forward.
Anish, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I'm just thinking whether our friend Sam Altman or some of the other AI vendors would agree with the messaging that when they're putting out the messaging that AI will take over the world and do everything for you. And I think if I was in their position, I probably would be saying the same thing because that's how you generate excitement. But realistically, we've been here a number of times where we were promised revolution, and yes, it is revolutionary for sure, but it's not to a level that it is going to completely change what we do. And I've been on calls with vendors where they say, all you need is AI agents and you don't need a business, you don't need people anymore, and agents will take care of everything. Just not true. You need all those three things in. And I think Daniel had a good way of doing it is if you put your process up at a high level, don't go into the lowest level of detail because we all get lost at that level. At a high level, put your process up and saying, is this rules based? Is this judgment based? Apply our two people test to it. And where do I want humans coming in for control and oversight? And if you draw that out, it's actually giving you a really good roadmap as to what your process should look like. But the precursor to this is you've got to be bold. You've got to be disruptive in your own business to say, can we be better? And that's got to be the real starting point.
Thank you. I guess, well, kind of as we move towards the I guess, closing remarks, and if there's any questions as well, I guess the framework that you're looking at as a business leader and a function leader, four things really. You got your variability of input, you're looking at your frequency of change, sensitivity to cost, and then any risk and compliance factors that could be more specific to your business or your industry. If you take those four things there, they're obviously going to guide your approach, but you've probably the biggest thing is then going to be seeing where that value is and the best way to route there. Okay, brilliant. I guess let's start to move on to the final section here in terms of looking at some of the questions. So I'm just going to reshare a screen here when everyone can see things coming up. Okay, I guess before the Q&A, final remarks quickly from you two. Daniel first, what's one rule of thumb that people should take away from this?
Yeah, I think it's just to reiterate what I said, really. The battle isn't between RPA and agents. It's how they work together with people. So our tagline is agents think, robots do, people lead. And how they all work together, how they're orchestrated, that's key.
Same question, Anish. One thing.
So I would take it a step before Daniel, and I think we've got a perfect solution. We need to make sure we're addressing the right problems with it. So you can take the webinar series of Hate It, Automate It. The more exciting one for us is creating new opportunities. We've got customers who are starting new services. They're thinking of new ways they can actually do products with this new resource with pretty much unlimited capacity that they have at their hands. And it didn't fit with rhyming. So that's why we've gone with the Hate It, Automate It. But new opportunities, new services, new ways of doing things, automated. Think digital first. There's tremendous potential available. Find the right problems to solve.
Now, we'll have a couple of questions for you two that have come through, but just in case people do need to start diving off before 5 o'clock, if there's anything that some of our attendees want to do, if you want to go a step further, there's a couple of options here on the screen for you. So on one of those options, you can download a report from UiPath, which essentially builds the trends and builds on everything that we've been discussing here. And then if you're looking at this in your own organization as well, obviously, if you want to come talk to us, we would love that. So feel free to book in some time with us as well, and we can talk about it through some of these different approaches. Anyone that does need to leave, thank you. But there are a few questions here that we can ask the gentlemen. So if you do have time and you want to hear more of their wisdom, we've got a chance. So Daniel, first one, where are you seeing, if you can actually got an example for this one by the looks of it, give us an example of where you're seeing agentic automation deliver value today rather than just being talked about.
Yeah, so as you know, we've been in the RPA business for years, and we always talked about the ability for RPA to improve the efficiency of tasks so that people are doing less mundane work. But there were always these gaps that we just couldn't achieve with RPA. So I think I keep coming back to this invoice processing example, which we've mentioned, but this is absolutely resonating. And in finance generally, there are big changes happening with the inclusion of agents into existing automated processes. So we ourselves within UiPath have completely automated our own finance operations. Using agents, using robots working together, and that's really exciting. And what we're doing now is we're bundling up a whole bunch of solutions to make it easier for Centelli and make it easier for customers to reach value faster using templated flows, templated processes. And for example, in order to cash, so it's absolutely transforming those. Finance, but also in HR as well.
So you've broken the golden rule of never get high on your own supply, because by the sounds of it, you have very high on that supply and deployed a bunch of obviously robots to make the UiPath business more efficient as you've had the success that you've had over the last few years. So yeah, that makes sense. Next one, I'll point this to an extent. So we've automated quite a few processes already, but anything with exceptions still ends up back with people. How are you seeing teams deal with that without it becoming messy?
So we're starting to expand or improve the output of automation by plugging AI and agents into it. So in the past, it used to be very rules-based, and the challenge with rules is they're brittle. They don't handle the real world. So we would be passing those over to human, but now we can expand that to say, is this just a variation of an existing scenario that's already been configured and just come in differently? Or is this a case of being completely different and we really need to think we maybe had a gap in our business process? So increasingly the automation percentage is going up. However, where the messy part comes in is we have to remember that the automations and AI and agents are designed to do our bidding. So we are designing processes to say, well, if this needs to go to a human, what input do I need from the human? And how do we make it easy for them to provide that input? So if we can make that easy, bring friction down, make their task just focused on exactly what needs to get done, it's going to work a lot faster. So how we're interacting with people, whether it be through an email, whether it be an SMS, whether it be a web portal, we're designing that specifically for that scenario, for that process, and for that exception, and for that human capability as well. You've got to consider the human factor in. So tailor these exception and how the handoff to human works in the way that's best for a human, and it's very easy to do.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Daniel, I've got one here that I'll point to you. So how do you justify ROI for agentic automation when costs are less predictable, going back to what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, and there's this number flying around from different analysts, the sort of 94% of agentic or AI pilots struggle to reach ROI. And I think it's all to do with the fact that a lot of these pilots are playing around with different technologies, but the goals of those pilots isn't really to build out a full-scale solution. So I think the key thing is here to picture the use of an agent as just one part of an end-to-end process. And it's only when you start stringing these things together, either multi-agents or with combination of robots and agents together, that you actually are able to understand the full ROI. So don't set your goals to improve a task. Set your goals to look across the process and see how it can be improved across all those different tasks with different RPA and agentic technologies working together. But specifically with agents, the variability of what an agent could potentially be doing could be tricky to initially assess. It is through testing, it is through evaluation tools that for example, we have that enables you in that design phase to narrow down the scope of what an agent would be doing, and that helps you much better control the costs that are involved in running the agent. So it's setting the scope of what an agent would be doing and restricting it down to something that you can control much more easily.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Got last one here then, so we'll go to Anish for this finishing one. A lot of our processes are mostly structured, but there is always edge cases. We've tried to handle them with rules, but it gets hard to maintain. How do you know when to stop adding rules and try something else?
The challenge we face is when we're trying to do an ROI, we need volume. And in reality, for some of these edge cases, we just don't know the number of times a volume will come in. One of the reasons why we love UiPath as a platform is the amount of information that we can log and get insight as to what goes on is quite high. So absolutely plug in automation, let it go into it, do a very definitive set of rules or scenarios that it's handling, and log the other scenarios that it's not handling. So like Daniel was saying, where we say humans lead, we can look back a month or 2 months later and saying, how many edge cases that I've had, what was happening in those edge cases, and how do I now pick a rule? So don't just keep trying to say, we want to go towards 100%, accept that it's going to be at 60%, 70%, or whatever it is. Understand what the 30 is and then go after it.
Thank you very much. I think that is it. There's no others that we have. So I guess final point, then because we do still have some attendees on. So again, final, if you do want to come back and talk to UiPath or us, you had those 2 QR codes there. You had the UiPath report, and then you've got direct call to come speak to us, and we can always facilitate conversations with UiPath as well. It has been a good 10 years we've been working with them, and like Anish said, we do love the platform and the business, and fortunately for us, they're staying at the top of the game with the move to agent. So lastly then, I would like to thank Anish and Daniel for joining us. Thank everyone that we've had taking the time out of their day to join us on this Hate It Automate It webinar, and we'll hopefully see some of you here for the same, not the same webinar next month, but the next webinar when we have it next month. So thank you very much for joining, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.